Hello, and welcome to Holy Nirvana. I'm here today with the GeForce RTX 4080. That's the 16GB version and not the 12GB version that was unceremoniously unlaunched. Let's go ahead and unbox it. You gotta pull off the tab here, and then go to the other side and pull off the other tab, and now you can open it up. This is a nice looking box, but at the end of the day, it's just a box. The card itself looks virtually identical to the RTX 4090. In fact, I think the only difference is the 8 instead of a 9. Also, you don't get the 4-pronged adapter for power, you get a 3-pronged adapter. You get 4 display outputs, 3 DisplayPort 1.4a, and 1 HDMI 2.1. And here we see the much maligned 16-pin 12-volt high-power adapter. I don't know why we needed this. Couldn't we have just used 3 or 2 8-pin connectors? But that's what we've got. So let's move on and get to the performance results. Alright, so we've got benchmarks from 15 different games, including a mix of standardized rasterization and ray tracing. Overall, you can see that the RTX 4080 does come in second place, right behind, well, not right behind, it's actually quite a decent gap between the RTX 4090 and the 4080. I mean, when you look at the previous generation, look at the 3090 and the 3080. That's only 7 frames per second on average across our test suite, and here we are looking at 23 frames per second. It's almost a 30% difference, and it's about a 30% difference in price, so that kind of makes sense. But the 4080 is horribly expensive, considering it has the same 80 class model number as the 3080 that was supposed to be a $700 card. Now, the 3080 Ti, it launched last year in the midst of the GPU shortages, and it cost $1,200, and that's what Nvidia says that the 4080 is replacing. But this isn't a 4080 Ti, and it's rather insulting. Moving on, let's look at the individual games. Bright Memory Infinite, the 4080 is quite a bit slower than the 4090 and only marginally faster than the 3090 Ti. That applies to many of the other results as well. Borderlands 3, it's the second fastest card, about 10 to 15% above the 3090 Ti, which incidentally now costs about the same as a 4080. Control Ultimate Edition. This is a ray tracing enabled game, and again we see a rather large gulf between the 4080 and 4090, nearly 50%, but the 4080 is only about 15% faster than the 3090 Ti. When Nvidia says it's twice as fast as the previous generation, it's only talking about games that use DLSS 3. And do you really want higher latency with fake generated frames that sometimes have artifacts? I mean, it might be okay, but it is not a panacea. Cyberpunk 2077. This is one of those games that does support DLSS 3, and I believe in testing it reached about 115 frames per second on the 4090, but without DLSS 3 and running at native resolution, we see 30 frames per second from the 4080 compared to 44 frames per second from the 4090. Of note, AMD has run this same test on its upcoming RX 7900 XTX, and it reported frame rates of around 24 frames per second. It's not looking like AMD is going to be the saviors of gaming performance, at least when we are speaking about ray tracing performance. Far Cry 6, this is one of the games that does start to run into CPU bottlenecks. quite a few games do, even at 4K Ultra. And so the gap between the various GPUs narrows, and AMD's 6950 XT actually places ahead of the 3090 Ti for a change. Flight Simulator. This is the poster child for needing as much CPU performance as you can throw at a game. You can see that the 4080 and 4090 are virtually tied, though the 4090 does offer better 1% minimum frame rates. Fortnite? Well, what can we say about a game that's competitive and benefits from super high frame rates, and then we turned on maximum ray tracing and dropped it below 60 FPS on all of the cards. But it does show what the Unreal Engine 5 might be capable of in the future. And here we see the 4080 taking a rather substantial lead over the 3090 Ti for a change. Forza Horizon 5. I actually incorrectly said this is using ray tracing. It supports it, but my testing does not have it enabled. Without ray tracing, you can see that performance is still quite a bit faster than on the 3090 Ti, with AMD's cards filling in the blanks. Horizon Zero Dawn. This is not a particularly demanding game, as evidenced by our 100 plus FPS frame rates. The 3090 Ti, meanwhile, is only about 10% slower than the 4080. The upgraded enhanced edition of Metro Exodus, with Hairworks and PhysX enabled, is still not extremely demanding, and so the 4080 once again beats the 3090 Ti, but it does not absolutely destroy it. Minecraft, with path tracing, and set to maximum render distance on the ray tracing chunks, shows decent performance from the 4080, but again the 4090 looks better and the 3090 Ti isn't that much worse. Look at the 3080 and things might seem more justifiable, but then you have to consider that the price is more like the 3080 Ti. Red Dead Redemption 2, our sole Vulkan API game, shows performance once again about in line with everything else. Total War Warhammer 3. This one is very demanding on the VRAM and other aspects of performance. It's not entirely clear why, because it doesn't look that good, but it does tend to favor Nvidia's cards right now, and the newer 40 series does see a substantial uplift compared to the previous generation, though we do need to go back and retest some of those with the latest drivers. And last but not least, Watch Dogs Legion. This game does support ray-traced reflections, but we have not enabled them because we had plenty of ray-tracing games already, and the performance again shows a decent gen-on-gen uplift, but it's hard to justify the 71% increase in price when performance only went up about 30 to 40%. We also have test results at 1440p that we won't get into all of the individual games, but as you'll see, the gap between the various cards tends to shrink as we become more CPU limited. Drop down to 1080p Ultra and that becomes even more the case, and the RX 6950 XT is now nipping at the heels of the 3090 and the 3090 Ti. It's only slower because of the ray tracing games where AMD's architecture is simply inferior. Overall, what do I think of the new RTX 4080? It's simply too expensive. Nvidia has gotten stuck in thinking like it's 2021 still and that cryptocurrency miners are going to buy everything that they make. That is no longer the case, and unless they've already sold all of those 30 series cards that were sitting in warehouses, we think that the performance is simply not good enough to justify the generational increases in pricing. The same thing happened with the RTX 20 series. Remember in 2017 and 2018 where we had a huge cryptocurrency boom and bust cycle? The RTX 20 series came out and had higher prices because of that cycle. I'm giving the RTX 4080 Founders Edition a generous 73%. That's not to say that it's truly that level of performance, but we simply don't know exactly where AMD's RX 7900 cards will land, and so we will need to wait until next month. If the 7900 XT can beat the 4080 in performance while costing $300 less, that would obviously drop the relative score of our 4080. But we will just leave that for now. That about does it for this review. We are a new channel, so please like and subscribe and share with your friends, and get the bell on because we would love to have you notified when our next video comes out.